They said she had to choose between her life or her daughter, but her rancher took both into his arms. The wind shrieked through the Wyoming territory like a banshee with a vendetta. Snow lashed sideways, flaying the earth in blinding sheets, burying the trail and all sense of direction. Amid the chaos, a battered covered wagon lay tipped and then broken, one wheel half swallowed by the freezing mire. Inside, Clara Whitmore screamed. Her body arched against the pain, every nerve frayed raw, her breath coming in frantic, uneven gasps. Sweat beaded across her brow despite the cold, and her fingers clutched at the damp straw beneath her as if it could anchor her to something solid. But there was no stability here. Only the wind, only pain. And blood. She was alone. Alone, save for the child trying to enter the world. The labor had come early, or maybe right on time. She had no more means of counting days than she did of measuring her own terror. Somewhere behind her, the memory of fire still lived, an orange inferno devouring the town of Red Willow. She had run from it. From the men who came after. From the devil who called himself Brenner. Now she was running no longer. Now she was birthing. In a storm. In the middle of nowhere. She bore down, screaming hoarsely into the storm, teeth chattering between cries. A tearing, searing pressure racked her lower body. She was certain she was dying. Death would be a mercy. But the child cried first. It was not a loud wail, more a strangled gasp, the desperate bleat of new lungs tasting cold air. Clara choked a sob, reached blindly in the half-light of the wagon, fumbling for the slick, fragile. Bundled. She found her daughter by instinct, pulling her close, trembling. Her breath came in short bursts now, her vision dimmed. The baby whimpered against her breast. Clara wrapped her in the last clean scrap of cloth she could find, a bit of her late husband's old shirt. Reverently, she kissed the child's wet forehead. Stone roared on, drowning everything else. Her thoughts wandered. The last time she had prayed was weeks ago. Back in the town, just before everything turned to ash. She'd prayed for strength, for clarity. Neither had come. Only survival. Now. As darkness pressed around her, Clara did not pray. She held her daughter close and waited. For death. For sleep. For wolves. They came with the wing-three shadows at the tree line. Gray fur slicked with snow. Yellow eyes gleaming in the night. One crept forward, drawn by the scent of blood. Clara heard the growl before she saw them. She blinked hard, vision doubling, her arms tightening around the child. The wolf padded closer, slow and deliberate. Clara didn't have the strength to scream. Her body shook from cold and fatigue. She reached for the hatchet somewhere near her side, but found nothing but hay. The beast lowered its head. A gunshot shattered the silence. The wolf crumpled mid-step. Its body twitched once in the snow, then stilled. A second shot rang out. Then a third. The other wolves vanished. Clara's ears rang. Her heart pounded despite her weakness. She didn't understand what had happened. She thought maybe she was dreaming. Then a shadow appeared at the mouth of the wagon, tall, broad, half-silhouetted. By the blizzard. A rifle slung over one shoulder. A coat heavy with snow. A beard thick and dark. Eyes unreadable, sharp, like something carved from old iron. He stepped forward. She flinched. The man didn't speak. He knelt by her, examined the child with careful eyes, then Clara. He muttered, just once, "Damn fools, all of you." She couldn't respond. Without another word, he lifted her gently, as though she weighed nothing. She felt the warmth of his coat. Her daughter was pressed between them, wrapped tightly. Then motion, the sway of a horse, the rush of snow through, tangled hair. She drifted in and out of consciousness. The storm howled louder. Or maybe her mind was finally slipping away. The last thing she remembered was his voice, low, quiet, a whisper against the storm. "You're not dying today, miss. Not on my land." Clara awoke to the crackle of fire. Her body ached with a fierce, raw dullness, but she was warm. The baby was still nestled against her, breathing, alive. She turned her head slowly. The room was dark, save for the glow of embers. A simple log cabin, sparse furnishings, walls lined with old tools and pelts. It smelled of pine and smoke and something more earthy. A kettle hissed on the stove. The man was there seated near the hearth, whittling something by firelight. He hadn't noticed she was awake, or maybe he had and didn't care. She stirred. The baby mewled faintly. He looked over. Not with surprise, just quiet recognition. "You're in my cabin," he said flatly. "You and the girl. I found you." On the ridge, wagon was busted. Wolves were nosing around. Clara tried to speak, but her throat was dry. She rasped, "My name's Clara." He nodded without offering his. She tried again. "My baby, she's fine," he said. "Small, but strong. She'll make it. So will you if you eat something." He rose, poured her a cup of broth, brought it to her without flourish. She sipped slowly, gratefully. He watched only long enough to ensure she didn't choke, and returned to his chair. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, she said, "You could have left us." "I could have," he agreed. "Why didn't you?" He paused his carving, looked into the fire, then shrugged. "Didn't seem right. You don't even know me. Didn't seem to matter." She lay back, exhausted. Days passed. Snow fell endlessly outside. The man Elias, she would eventually learn, moved with quiet precision. He fed the livestock, chopped wood, hunted game. He never asked her story, but she gave it anyway. One cold evening when the silence became unbearable, she told him about Boston, her childhood, her dreams of teaching, about James, her husband, kind, idealistic, reckless, about their journey westward, meant to bring God's word to the wild places, about the fever that took him near Cheyenne. She paused often to collect herself. Elias never interrupted. Then came the fire. Red Willow had been a promise. A town barely alive, but full of settlers determined to build something better. Then came Brenner and his riders, ex-soldiers turned thieves. They came looking for something, a rumor about gold hidden by Union troops. They burned everything when they didn't find it. They said, "He wouldn't hurt me if I gave him what he wanted," she said. "But I didn't have anything, just this baby," he said. Her voice caught. He said it would be better if I chose my life or hers. Elias said nothing, so I ran, she whispered. Finally, he looked at her. "Ain't no man worth his salt says things like that." She blinked back tears. "Do you believe in curses?" "No, that's what he said, that she was born under one." Elias's eyes narrowed. He lied. "I keep wondering," she said softly, "if maybe she'd be safer without me." He shook his head slowly. "Kids don't come cursed. They come clean. It's the rest of the world that tries to break him." She didn't reply, but that night she slept a little more soundly. Their strange arrangement continued. Elias didn't ask for thanks, nor did he offer kindness in the traditional sense. He was blunt, quiet, but he never let them go hungry. When Clara struggled with the chores, he showed her once and expected her to remember. She did. He built a cradle for the Shia, baby sturdy, from cedar. Didn't say a word about it. Just left it near the hearth and went back outside. The baby, whom Clara had named Lottie, seemed drawn to Elias's voice, the deep rumble of it. She would smile when he hummed tunelessly in the barn. Once, Clara caught him cradling the girl. in one massive hand as he examined her tiny fingers like strange little curiosities. "She's going to be tough," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Clara nodded. "Like her father." He didn't answer that dot one evening. Clara asked, "Do you live here alone?" "Now I do." "Family?" "Once." She understood the tone, the finality in it. Didn't press, but something had shifted between them. Tentative, fragile thing. Not trust, not yet. But a kind of silent truce. A recognition. Then, one night, she woke to the distant sound of hooves. Not Elias's. She froze. Her blood chilled. He was already up, rifle in hand, peering through a slit in the shutter. Clara cradled Lottie tightly, whispering for her to stay quiet. Elias didn't speak, but his body had gone rigid, tense as a wire. "They're riding slow," he said, "not hiding their steps." Her breath caught. "Brenner?" He didn't answer. Outside, the snow was falling harder again, thick and heavy. Elias turned to her. "If I say run, you take the back door and don't stop. Got that?" "No." He raised a brow. "I'm not leaving again," she said, voice trembling. Elias watched her for a long moment, then gave a single nod. "Then we'll fight," he said. And Clara, once a schoolteacher, once a preacher's bride, once a broken woman gasping in the storm, nodded back. She was still afraid, but she wasn't running anymore. The wind didn't stop when the firelight flickered out. It screamed through the valley like a ghost still looking for flesh to tear. The snow deepened by the hour, blanketing the world in a deceptive calm. But within the walls of Elias's cabin, something else was beginning to settle routine. Each morning, Clara rose with a stiffness in her joints, and a newborn cradled close to her chest. Her strength was returning slowly, her pride even slower. She tried to contribute, feeding the chickens, gathering kindling, mending what little clothing she had left. She fumbled often, cursed more than she prayed, but never gave up. Elias spoke. Little, and when he did, his voice was dry as split wood, and twice as rough. But he watched. She could feel his eyes on her when she wrestled with the water bucket, when she tried to rock Lottie to sleep during one of the baby's colicky spells, when she cried at night and thought no one heard. He didn't offer sympathy. He offered space. Sometimes that was the kinder thing. One evening, Clara leaned against the doorframe, watching snowflakes swirl beneath the full moon. Elias was seated nearby, cleaning his rifle with methodical care. "I used to think I knew what hard was," she said, mostly to herself. He didn't look up. "You don't know what hard is till winter won't leave your bones, and you still got fences to mend." She gave a short, rueful laugh. "I meant life, loss. It used to be theoretical. You teach history long enough, it all blurs. But now it don't." She looked over at him. "Do you ever stop feeling it? The emptiness?" His hands paused. A long moment passed before he answered. "No, but you learn to work around it," he resumed, cleaning. Clara stood quietly a while longer. Then she said, "I think I want to stay." The words surprised her. They hung in the air like frost on a pane. Elias didn't react right away, just murmured, "This ain't a place for guests." "I'm not a guest." Another pause. He didn't. Object. And that was enough. The following weeks came with their own kind of silence. Not the silence of strangers, but the silence of people learning how to coexist. Clara began to recognize the rhythms of the ranch, the pacing of the animals, the deepening of the snowdrifts, the small signs that something was always watching from the tree line. She'd asked about wolves again. Elias told her they kept their distance if left unbothered. But there were other things that didn single quotes t. Once. She woke to find the barn door swinging open, the latch splintered. A calf was missing. Elias followed the tracks without a word, came back with blood on his coat and none on his skin. She didn't ask what he found. She didn't need to. Clara began to explore farther during the day. With Lottie swaddled against her chest, she wandered the edge of the woods, testing the weight of her own courage. Snow muffled the sound of her steps. Trees groaned under the burden of ice. It felt like walking through a painting too cold to touch. One day, she came back to find Elias sharpening knives. "I've been thinking," he said, without looking up. "You should learn how to shoot." Clara stared at him, startled. "Why? Storms break. Men don't always stay gone." She didn't ask who he meant. That afternoon, he handed her a rifle. She missed every shot, but she kept trying. The world outside didn't offer forgiveness. It didn't offer justice. Only preparation. Elias taught her where to stand to avoid. The wind, how to track a rabbit by broken snow, how to dress a wound when help was miles too far. He never praised, never smiled. But when she finally hit a tin can from 50 yards out, he simply nodded once. The acknowledgement felt heavier than applause. Lottie grew stronger with each passing day. Her eyes grew curious. Her hands grabbed at everything. Once, she caught Elias's beard and tugged so hard he muttered a curse. But the way he let her do it again spoke louder than any words. Clara began to understand him more in what he didn't say. The way he lingered in the doorway when she sang. The rough repairs to her worn-out boots. The silent way he replaced the drafty window near her bed. Elias wasn't kind, but he was consistent. That, in this place, was its own form of mercy. Then came the day Takoda appeared. It was dusk when Clara noticed the figure at the ridge. At first, she thought it was a trick of the light, just another shadow cast long by the sinking sun. But then it moved, fluid and steady, descending without urgency. Elias saw him too. He set down the saw he was using and stepped outside. Clara followed, clutching Lottie. The man who approached was neither young nor old. His face bore the weathered lines of time and war. His braids were bound with sinew and beads, and a cross. One cheek ran a scar that told of a blade's kiss long past. He said nothing as he reached the yard, but Elias raised a hand in a gesture that was half greeting, half warning. They stared at each other a long moment. Then, without turning, Elias spoke to Clara. "Inside?" Clara hesitated. "Is he dangerous?" "No," Elias said. "But I am, if you stay out here." That was answer enough. She went inside, but stood near the door, listening. She heard few words, most in a language she didn't know. But the tone was even respectful, not the kind of exchange shared between strangers. When Elias returned, his face was unreadable. "Name's Takoda," he said. "We fought together once." Clara blinked. "Fought? Where?" "Here, before the towns got drawn on maps. Before the trees were felled for churches." She tried to make sense of the quiet reverence in Elias's voice, but he said no more. Takoda stayed. He didn't ask for shelter. He simply took up space, moving through the ranch with quiet familiarity. He barely spoke, even to Elias. His communication was sparse, often just gestures or looks. And yet, Clara noticed how the animals settled in his presence, how Lottie quieted when he entered a room. At first, Clara was cautious. She had learned the hard way what men were capable of. But Takoda never overstepped. He spent his days hunting. Bringing back game, even Elias admitted, was elusive. He carved small animals from wood, left them on windowsills or fence posts. He spoke to Lottie and Lakota, his voice like wind in tall grass. One night, Clara asked Elias, "Why is he here?" Elias stirred the fire. He heard something. What kind of something? Tracks, not just wolves. Men, 5 or 6, riding heavy. Her breath caught. Brenner? Maybe others. Doesn't matter who, just that they're heading this way. She looked to Lottie, sleeping soundly in her arms. What do we do? We prepare, Elias said simply. Takoda didn't speak, but the next morning he brought back a deer and a set of fresh tracks. He traced them in the snow with the tip of his knife, showed Clara how the horses were shod, how deep their prints pressed. She learned more in that morning and in all her months on the trail. They began to fortify the ranch. Elias showed her how to create choke points along the ravine near the tree line. Takoda set traps, crude but effective. Clara spent the days loading bullets, her fingers raw from the cold metal. At night, she prayed again. Not for herself, but for the child. And then something unexpected happened. Trust. It didn't come in a speech or a gesture. It came in the small things. In the way, Takoda handed her a knife without hesitation. In the way, Elias no longer hovered when she fired the rifle. In the way, Lottie laughed with no fear in her eyes. One morning, Clara woke to a carved bear beside her pillow. She held it in her palm for a long time, then whispered to Lottie, "You've got more protectors than most queens, little one." Takoda stood watch often now, always near the ridge. He didn't say what he saw, but his expression grew tighter with each passing day. Elias came to her that night, sitting by the hearth while Lottie nursed. "They'll be here soon." Her throat tightened. "Do we have enough?" "No," he said plainly. "But we've got something better." "What?" He looked at her, reason. They sat in silence after that. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She held her daughter and listened to the fire pop and hiss. Outside, the wind changed direction. The tracks Takoda found were no longer days old. The storm had thinned, and the horses would ride faster now. There was no more time to build. No more time to run. Clara sat alone after the others had gone to prepare. She rocked Lottie gently, staring at the rifle beside the cradle. For a moment, she thought of Boston, of the chalkboard in her old classroom, of the girls who thought reading poetry made them strong. She kissed her daughter's forehead, whispered something that sounded like a prayer, then stood. Tomorrow they would come, but tonight she would not run. The sky was too still that morning, like it was holding its breath. A thin mist clung to the frozen ground, blurring the line between earth and sky, making the world feel like it had been forgotten by time. The snow had hardened overnight, crusted, and sharp underfoot. Every sound seemed too loud, the creak of wood, the shuffle of boots, the clink of steel. Clara stood in the yard, her rifle in her hands, her heartbeat hammering like a drum in her throat. She wore one of Elias's old coats, the sleeves rolled up, cinched tight at the waist. It swallowed her figure, but she welcomed the weight. Lottie was asleep inside the cabin, bundled beneath layers of fur and blankets. Takoda had laid a black stone beside the cradle that morning, muttering something in Lakota before stepping out into the cold. Elias hadn't spoken since dawn. He just stared toward the tree line, waiting. They were coming. Clara had never killed a man. She had thought about it, dreamed it, even when she remembered the smell of red willow burning, the screams, the way Brenner had looked at her like she was livestock. But dreaming of vengeance and holding a loaded rifle in shaking hands were not the same thing. Now, standing between that memory and the cabin where her daughter slept, she wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. She was thinking about survival, about standing between the past and the future with nothing but a barrel of iron and a backbone that had been forged in storms and fear. Elias moved first. He pointed down toward the ravine, where the trail curved near the edge of the property. That's where the riders would come. He and Takoda had stacked broken fence rails and brushwood there, hidden behind a natural bottleneck in the rocks. It wasn't a fortress, but it would slow them down. Maybe long enough Takoda stood near. The far ridge, bow slung over his shoulder, a war club at his hip. His face was painted in dark ash and red clay. He looked ageless in that moment, not modern, not ancient, just real. Clara met his eyes once, and he nodded. She nodded back, pulse racing. Then the sound of hooves came, distant but growing. 6 riders, no banners. No voices. They rode with a taw. Purpose. Elias slid into position behind a cluster of rocks, his rifle steady, his eyes hard. He didn't blink much. Clara crouched beside a tree near the edge of the clearing, rifle pointed low. Her breath fogged in front of her, visible proof she was still here, still alive. The first rider came into view, a scout, lean, long coat flapping like wings. He slowed, eyes scanning the trail, sensing something wrong but not knowing what. Then a sharp whistle cut the air. Takoda's arrow flew silently and struck the man in the throat. He crumpled without a sound, and the real noise began. The others rushed forward, chaos breaking across the ravine like thunder. Gunshots cracked, sparks leapt from stone. Horses screamed and bolted. Clara ducked instinctively, then rose and fired. Missed. Fired. Again, a man cried out, his leg torn open by her shot. He tumbled from his saddle. She felt nothing but cold determination. Elias fired with precision, dropping a rider with a single shot. Another went down seconds later, scrambling for cover but finding none. But then came Brenner. He wasn't dressed. Like the others, no dusty coat or ratty hat. He wore a cavalry jacket, blue and tattered, with rusted buttons that gleamed like old teeth. He dismounted in full view, gun already raised, a smile curving his scarred face. Elias McCrae, he shouted across the snow. Heard you'd gone soft, taking in women and babies. You know that's not your way. Elias didn't answer. His eyes narrowed. Brenner stepped forward, casual, like a man walking into church. I just want what's mine, he said. The girl, and the map her daddy died for. There is no map, Clara shouted back before she realized she'd spoken. Brenner laughed. A woman who speaks truth and lies in the same breath. You're brave now, preacher's wife, but that baby of yours? She won't last the storm coming. Then he raised his revolver and fired. Clara dove behind the tree. Bark exploded beside her cheek. Elias returned fire, but Brenner was already moving, weaving between rocks, closing the distance. Another shot rang out, this one from behind. Takoda had leapt from the ridge, his war cry slicing the silence. He landed behind one of the remaining men, driving his blade into the man's spine. The others hesitated, fear flickering across their faces. But Brenner didn't stop. He turned, raised his gun, and fired. Takoda flinched, stumbled, then righted himself. His shoulder bled, but he kept coming. Clara ran toward the cabin. She had to get to Lottie. Another shot cracked the air. A bullet grazed her arm, hot and sharp. She bit back a scream, stumbled into the cabin, slammed the door shut, and dropped. The bar into place. Lottie wailed from her crib. Clara raced to her, scooping her up just as the window shattered behind her. A man was climbing in mud-covered, teeth bared. Clara turned, rifle shaking in her hands. Back off, she said. He laughed, and she pulled the trigger. The shot lifted him off the sill, sent him crashing to the floor with a sickening thud. Clara trembled, clutching Lottie, tears burning her eyes. Outside, gunfire slowed. Then silence. She waited. A knock at the door. Clara. It's me. Elias. She unbarred the door. He stepped inside, bleeding from a gash on his thigh, but still standing. Takoda followed, blood seeping down his side, but his grip on the war club never loosened. Only one figure still stood outside. Brenner. He was wounded barely. A graze to the jaw, maybe. His smile had twisted into something meaner. He held his pistol pointed at the cabin. "You won't win?" he called. "Even if you kill me, there'll be more. I'm not the only one who wants what's owed." Elias stepped forward. "You got nothing owed. You're just too damn bitter to die quiet." Brenner's hand twitched. Elias raised his rifle. They fired. At the same time, the shots echoed across the valley. Brenner's bullet struck Elias in the side, spinning him backward. Elias dropped to his knees. Brenner staggered, blood blooming across his chest, but he stayed standing. Clara stepped outside. Lottie, still in her arms. Brenner turned toward her. She stared at him. He sneered. "That baby's cursed, you know. Born in fire, raised in blood." "She's not cursed," Clara said, voice steady. "She's chosen." Then she shot him in the heart. He fell forward, face first, into the snow. Steam rose from the ground around him. He didn't move again. Clara ran to Elias. He was alive, but barely. Blood soaked his coat. He looked up at her and gave a weak half-smile. "I told you," he whispered. "You're tougher than you look." "Don't talk," she said, pressing. "Cloth to the wound. Save your strength." But he shook his head. "You did it. You didn't run." "I couldn't." "I knew you wouldn't." Takoda crouched beside them, murmured something low, then tore a strip from his own cloak to bandage Elias's side. They worked through the night, tending wounds, burning the bodies. The smell lingered through the next morning. Spring arrived. Slowly in the valley. The snow thinned, and green crept back into the land like a hesitant guest. Clara planted seeds near the fence. She taught herself to cook over the open fire. Lottie crawled before she walked, and spoke her first word before. The birds returned, "Da." Elias limped now, a wound like his never healed clean. But he walked, leaned on Clara's shoulder when needed, and taught Lottie to whistle with 2 fingers. Takoda stayed until the first full moon of spring, then left without goodbye. He'd left a carved wolf beside Lottie's cradle. Clara found it the next morning and knew he would return someday. One evening, Clara sat by the fire, Lottie in her lap, Elias beside her. They didn't talk much. The silence between them was warm now, not brittle, earned. "I've been thinking," Elias said finally. "We ought to build a proper schoolhouse." Clara raised her brows. "Here?" He shrugged. "Plenty of land. More folks'll come." "They always do." She looked around. The cabin, the trees, the distant ridge. She saw a future now. Not in dreams, but in roots. "I'd like that," she said. She looked down at Lottie, brushing a lock of hair from the girl's cheek. "Your mother didn't run," she whispered. "And neither will you." Outside, the fire crackled, and the valley, once soaked in blood, breathed again.